The metallic screech of wheels against concrete pierced the silence of the dimly lit mansion. A wheelchair sat precariously at the top of the marble staircase, its occupant a thin, dark-haired boy of about 10 gripping the armrests with trembling hands. Behind him, a woman's cold voice cut through the air. "If you can't take care of yourself, Matt, then maybe you should learn the hard way." The wheelchair tipped forward. Time seemed to slow as Matt felt himself falling, each second stretching into eternity. The polished stairs rushed up to meet him, his reflection fragmenting across their marble surface. He closed his eyes, bracing for impact. The crash echoed through the mansion like thunder, the wheelchair splintering as it tumbled down the stairs. Metal-twisted wheels snapped off, and Matt's small body bounced like a rag doll before coming to rest at the bottom, motionless. Sarah, his stepmother, watched from above with an expression devoid of emotion. Next to her, James, Matt's brother, turned away, unable to watch but unwilling to help. The silence that followed was deafening. Hours later, in the pouring rain, Nathan Walker's car headlights cut through the darkness of a deserted street. Through the sheets of rain, he spotted something unusual, a small figure, dragging himself along the wet pavement. Nathan slowed his car, squinting through the downpour. It was a boy, soaked to the bone, pulling himself forward with raw, bleeding hands, his legs dragged uselessly behind him, his clothes torn and muddy. Nathan's heart stopped when he saw the boy's face bruised, yet somehow still holding on to a fragment of dignity. "Dear God," Nathan whispered, throwing his car door open and rushing to the boy's side. "What happened to you?" Matt looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much pain for someone so young. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "They said I was a burden. They said I deserved this." As Nathan carefully lifted the boy into his arms, police sirens wailed in the distance. Camera flashes began popping like lightning in the rain, media vultures drawn to tragedy. But Nathan noticed none of it. He was focused solely on the trembling child in his arms, making a silent vow that would change both their lives forever. If this heart-wrenching opening moved you, join our community of storytellers by subscribing. Together, we'll explore more powerful tales of triumph over adversity, unconditional love, and the unbreakable human spirit. Your support fuels our passion for meaningful storytelling. Before tragedy cast its shadow, Matt Thompson lived in a world filled with light. His childhood home, a modest 2-story house on Maple Street, echoed with laughter and the pitter-patter of small feet running through its halls. His father, Robert Thompson, was once a different man, a dedicated elementary school teacher who spent weekends teaching Matt to ride his bike and play catch in their backyard. Those golden days were marked by simple joys. Summer afternoons spent climbing trees, racing through sprinklers, and chasing fireflies as dusk settled over their quiet neighborhood. Matt excelled in sports, particularly soccer, where his natural agility made him the star of his youth league. His father never missed a game, always standing on the sidelines with a proud smile and a camera in hand. Matt's biological mother, Elizabeth, though present only in photographs and stories, had left an indelible mark on their home. Her warm smile watched over them from frames on the walls, and Robert often told Matt how much he had her kind eyes and gentle spirit. She had passed away shortly after Matt's birth, but Robert had kept her memory alive through countless bedtime stories about her courage and compassion. The house was always filled with music then. Robert would play the old piano in their living room every evening, teaching Matt simple melodies that grew more complex as his small fingers became more confident on the keys. These piano sessions became their sacred ritual, a time when father and son connected through the universal language of music. James, Matt's older brother, was his best friend and fierce protector in those days. Despite their 2-year age gap, the brothers were inseparable. James taught Matt how to build elaborate blanket forts, sneak cookies from the kitchen without getting caught, and stand up to playground bullies. They shared not just a bedroom but also their dreams, whispering late into the night about becoming astronauts or professional athletes. School was a place where Matt thrived. His teachers praised his quick mind and creative spirit. He had a particular talent for storytelling, often entertaining his classmates with elaborate tales during recess. His father kept a special drawer filled with Matt's artwork and stories, each piece carefully dated and preserved. The neighborhood knew the Thompsons as the family that hosted the best 4th of July barbecues, where Robert's famous homemade ice cream drew crowds from blocks away. Matt would help his father crank the old ice cream maker, feeling important as neighbors praised their joint effort. These gatherings were more than just parties, they were celebrations of community and family bonds. Everything changed when Robert met Sarah Mitchell at a parent-teacher conference. At first, she seemed like the answer to their prayers, a chance for their family to feel complete again. She had a way with words and a charm that made everyone believe in second chances. The early days of their blended family were promising, with Sarah making an effort to embrace Matt and James, cooking elaborate Sunday dinners, and helping with homework. Those memories now feel like scenes from another life, preserved in old home videos that gather dust in the attic. The last birthday before the accident stands out with particular clarity. Matt turning 9, surrounded by friends and family, blowing out candles on a superhero-themed cake. No one could have predicted that within months, their world would shatter like a mirror dropping to the floor, each piece reflecting a different version of what their family used to be. Robert's transformation from devoted father to distant figure began subtly, like a photograph slowly fading in the sun. The piano fell silent, the backyard catch sessions became less frequent, and the bedtime stories about Elizabeth stopped altogether. It was as if Sarah's presence gradually erased the colors from their once vibrant home, replacing them with shades of grey that grew darker with each passing day. Looking back, Matt could pinpoint the exact moment when he last saw his father's genuine smile the morning of the accident. Robert had promised to attend Matt's soccer championship that afternoon, ruffling his son's hair and saying, "Make me proud, champ." That promise, like so many others, would remain unfulfilled, lost in the chaos that followed hours later. The day that altered Matt's life forever began like any other autumn afternoon. The soccer championship was in full swing, and Matt kept glancing at the crowd, searching for his father's familiar face. Robert had promised to be there, but his seat remained empty as the game entered its final minutes. What Matt didn't know was that Robert was rushing to make it, his car speeding through residential streets, his mind divided between work obligations and his son's big game. The accident happened in a flash of screeching tires and shattering glass. Matt was racing down the field, seconds away from scoring the winning goal, when a black SUV lost control and careened onto the soccer field. Parents screamed, children scattered, but Matt froze in place, recognizing his father's vehicle an instant before impact. The sound of metal crushing bone would haunt Robert's nightmares for years to come. In the chaos that followed, Robert emerged from the wreck relatively unscathed, only to find his son lying motionless on the field. The paramedics worked frantically as a crowd gathered, their faces reflecting the horror of what they'd witnessed. Robert stood paralyzed, watching his son's blood stain the green grass crimson, knowing that his reckless attempt to keep a promise had destroyed his child's future. The hospital became their new home for months. Matt underwent multiple surgeries, but the damage to his spinal cord was irreversible. Robert haunted the sterile corridors like a ghost, unable to face his son's room or the accusing stares of other parents. Sarah, who had been dating Robert for just over a year, took charge of medical decisions while Robert retreated further into himself, drowning in guilt and whiskey. During Matt's recovery, Robert's visits became increasingly rare. He couldn't bear to see his once athletic son confined to a wheelchair, knowing he was responsible. Each time he looked at Matt, he saw not only his son but also a living reminder of his failure as a father. The guilt ate at him like acid, corroding the bond they once shared until it was barely recognizable. Sarah's true nature emerged during this period. What started as subtle comments about the financial burden of Matt's care evolved into open resentment. She convinced Robert that his presence was detrimental to Matt's recovery, that the sight of him only reminded the boy of what he'd lost. Robert, already drowning in self-loathing, latched onto this excuse to distance himself further. James, witnessing his father's cowardice and Sarah's manipulation, began to change. The protective older brother who once stood up for Matt now turned away, as if disability was contagious. He aligned himself with Sarah, perhaps out of self-preservation, perhaps seeking the parental approval that Robert no longer provided. The brotherhood that had once seemed unbreakable crumbled like a sandcastle in the tide. The legal aftermath of the accident was quietly settled out of court. Robert's insurance company paid for Matt's medical bills, and Sarah ensured that any potential lawsuit was squashed before it could begin. She orchestrated everything, from the medical care to the home modifications, all while building a narrative that cast her as the sacrificial stepmother, taking on a burden that wasn't hers to bear. Robert's guilt manifested in material compensation. Expensive gifts appeared regularly: video games, computers, books, anything to avoid actual interaction. Each present arrived with a card signed "Love, Dad," but the words rang hollow, like echoes in an empty room. Matt soon learned that no amount of gifts could fill the void left by his father's absence. The final betrayal came when Robert accepted a job offer in another state. Sarah presented it as an opportunity they couldn't refuse, but Matt understood the truth: his father was running away. The day they packed the car, Robert couldn't even look at his son. He mumbled something about staying in touch, about visiting soon, promises that would join the growing collection of broken ones that defined their new relationship. As the car pulled away, Matt watched from his wheelchair on the front porch, understanding with devastating clarity that his father would rather live with the guilt from afar than face the daily reminder of what he'd done. The man who had once been the center of Matt's universe had become nothing more than a shadow, a monthly check, and an ache that never quite went away. Life in the Thompson household devolved into a carefully orchestrated performance of cruelty. Sarah, now the undisputed authority, transformed the once welcoming home into a prison of psychological torment for Matt. Her abuse was calculated, always staying just within the bounds of what could be explained away to concerned teachers or neighbors. Mornings began with Sarah's sharp voice cutting through Matt's dreams, demanding he stop being lazy and get himself ready for school without assistance. The simple act of dressing became a battle against time and his own limitations, while Sarah stood in the doorway criticizing his every struggle. She had removed the handicap-accessible modifications from the bathroom, claiming they ruined the aesthetic of her home, making even basic hygiene a daily challenge. James, once Matt's fierce protector, became Sarah's perfect soldier. The older brother now walked past Matt in school hallways without acknowledgement, as if the wheelchair had rendered him invisible. At home, James participated in Sarah's psychological warfare, making comments about real sports in normal kids within Matt's earshot. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain. This was the same brother who had once sworn to always have his back. Meals became weapons in Sarah's arsenal. She deliberately placed food and dishes just out of Matt's reach, then mocked his attempts to access them. "If you want to eat, you'll figure it out," became her mantra, delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. Often Matt went to bed hungry, listening to the sounds of Sarah and James dining together, their laughter a cruel reminder of his exclusion from family life. The house itself seemed to conspire against Matt. Sarah rearranged furniture without warning, creating obstacle courses that his wheelchair couldn't navigate. She claimed it was redecorating, but her satisfied smirk when Matt's struggle told a different story. The elevator lift to the second floor mysteriously broke down frequently, leaving Matt stranded downstairs for days at a time. School offered little respite. Sarah had convinced the administration that Matt was attention-seeking and manipulative, undermining his attempts to report her abuse. She attended every parent-teacher conference with practiced tears, describing the challenges of raising a disabled child who refused to try and took advantage of his condition. Her performance was flawless, earning sympathy while painting Matt as the problem. James's transformation was perhaps the most painful to witness. He excelled in sports, earning the athletic acclaim that had once been Matt's dream. Sarah proudly displayed James's trophies in the living room, while Matt's pre-accident soccer awards mysteriously disappeared. When James's friends came over, they treated Matt like a piece of furniture, sometimes literally hanging their coats on his wheelchair, while Sarah looked on approvingly. Financial abuse complemented the emotional torment. Sarah controlled the insurance money meant for Matt's care, spending it on home renovations and James's sports equipment instead of medical necessities. Matt's wheelchair deteriorated without maintenance, its squeaking wheels and fraying cushions a testament to neglect. When he dared mention repairs, Sarah would launch into dramatic monologues about the burden of medical expenses. The nights were the worst. Matt would lie awake, listening to Sarah and James watching TV downstairs, their casual conversation and laughter a stark contrast to their daytime cruelty. Sometimes he caught glimpses of his old brother in James's unguarded moments, a fleeting look of guilt, a hesitation before following Sarah's latest cruel directive. But these moments vanished quickly, buried under layers of conditioned behavior. Communication with Robert dwindled to formal birthday and Christmas cards, each containing checks that Sarah promptly deposited for safekeeping. Matt's father had become a ghost, his absence a void that Sarah filled with poison. She delighted in reminding Matt that his father had chosen to leave, twisting the knife of abandonment deeper with each retelling of Robert's departure. In this atmosphere of constant psychological warfare, Matt learned to retreat into himself. He developed an outer shell of quiet compliance, while nurturing a core of resilience that Sarah couldn't touch. His wheelchair became both his prison and his fortress, a symbol of his limitations, but also of his endurance. Each day was a battle for survival in a house where love had been replaced by calculated cruelty and family ties had become chains of torment. The first rays of morning sunlight barely filtered through the windows when Sarah's voice shattered the silence. "Matt, get up now. This house isn't going to clean itself." Her heels clicked sharply against the hardwood floors as she entered his room, yanking open the curtains with unnecessary force. Matt struggled to sit up in bed, his muscles stiff from another night on the worn mattress Sarah refused to replace. She stood over him, a cleaning bucket filled with supplies balanced on her hip, her face set in its usual mask of contempt. "Today you're going to earn your keep. I'm tired of you sitting around while everyone else works." The list of chores she presented was impossible: mopping the floors, dusting high shelves, cleaning windows and scrubbing bathrooms. All tasks that required mobility and balance Matt simply didn't have. When he tried to explain this, Sarah's response was cutting. "Excuses are for the weak. You want to live here? You work? It's that simple." James walked past the doorway, already dressed for school in his Letterman jacket. He paused briefly, watching as Sarah dumped the cleaning supplies onto Matt's bed. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, perhaps remembrance of the times he'd helped his younger brother with simple tasks. But Sarah's sharp glance in his direction made him straighten his shoulders and walk away, leaving Matt to face the impossible alone. The mop was the first challenge. Matt tried to maneuver it from his wheelchair, but the awkward angle made it impossible to generate enough force to clean effectively. Water splashed onto his clothes, making them cold and heavy. Sarah watched from the kitchen, sipping her coffee and making disapproving noises at his efforts. "You missed a spot," she called out repeatedly, each comment dripping with satisfaction at his struggle. "Maybe if you weren't so lazy, this wouldn't be so difficult. Look at how pathetic this is. You can't even clean a simple floor properly." Her words echoed off the walls, each one striking like a physical blow. The worst came when Matt attempted to reach the higher shelves for dusting. His wheelchair couldn't get him close enough to the bookcase, and stretching caused shooting pain through his back. As he strained to reach a particularly high shelf, the wheelchair's wheel caught on the uneven floorboard Sarah had refused to fix. The chair tipped precariously, sending Matt sprawling onto the floor. Sarah's laughter cut through the room. "Oh, look who's taking a break already. Get up." I said get up. She made no move to help him, as he struggled to pull himself back into the chair, his arms trembling with effort. "This is exactly what I mean. You're nothing but a burden. You can't even do simple housework without making a scene." Hours passed, and Matt's arms felt like lead. The house remained largely uncleaned, despite his best efforts. Sweat soaked through his shirt, and his hands were raw from gripping the cleaning tools. Sarah circled him like a vulture, pointing out every imperfection, every missed spot, every failure. "Your father would be so disappointed," she said, her voice honey-sweet with malice. "But then again, he already is, isn't he? That's why he left. He couldn't stand to look at what you've become." She picked up the barely used duster, waving it in his face. "You know, normal children help their parents without all this drama." The day wore on, and Matt's attempts at cleaning became increasingly desperate. He knew there would be consequences for failure: no dinner, no bathroom breaks, no peace, until Sarah decided he had learned his lesson. His wheelchair left wet tracks across the floor he'd tried to mop, creating new messes even as he attempted to clean old ones. By late afternoon, Sarah declared the experiment a failure. Just as I expected, she announced to no one in particular. "Completely useless. You can't even handle the simplest tasks. No dinner for you tonight. Maybe hunger will motivate you to try harder tomorrow." She gathered the cleaning supplies, making sure to keep them just out of his reach on a high shelf. The final insult came when James returned from school, tracking mud across the floor Matt had spent hours trying to clean. Sarah said nothing about the mess, instead praising James for his muddy shoes being a sign of proper athletic activity. The contrast was deliberate, another reminder of Matt's perceived inadequacy in their household. The breaking point came on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening. Matt's wheelchair, already damaged from months of neglect, finally gave out as he attempted to navigate the house's narrow hallway. The metal frame groaned, then collapsed with a sickening crack, sending him sprawling onto the cold hardwood floor. The sound brought Sarah running, not out of concern, but with an expression of calculated opportunity. "Well, well," she said, standing over Matt's crumpled form. "Looks like your precious chair is finally done for." Just like everything else you touch, she nudged one of the broken wheels with her foot, watching it spin uselessly. "I suppose you'll expect us to buy you a new one. Another expense for your endless list of needs." Matt lay there, his cheek pressed against the floor, fighting back tears. The wheelchair had been his last connection to independence, and now even that was gone. Through blurred vision, he saw James hovering in the doorway, his brother's face a mask of practiced indifference that couldn't quite hide the guilt in his eyes. Sarah seized the moment to deliver her final verdict. "I've had enough," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "No more chairs, no more accommodations, no more pretending we can make this work. You're leaving, Matt. Tonight?" She pulled out her phone, making a show of checking the weather. "Look at that, it's supposed to rain all night. How fitting." Matt's attempts to reason with her fell on deaf ears. "Please," he begged, "I have nowhere to go. You can't just throw me out." But Sarah was already pulling open drawers, stuffing a few of his belongings into a small backpack. She worked with efficient cruelty, selecting items that would be useless to him on the streets, a reminder that this wasn't about survival, but punishment. James watched the scene unfold, shifting uncomfortably. For a moment it seemed he might intervene, might remember the brotherhood they once shared, but Sarah's sharp glance in his direction was enough to make him step back, retreating into the safety of his role as the favored child. "Mom's right," he muttered, though his voice cracked on the words. "You're just dragging everyone down." The rain started as Sarah opened the front door. the wind driving sheets of water onto the porch. Without ceremony, she dragged Matt across the floor and out onto the wet concrete. The backpack followed, landing with a splash beside him. "Your father left because of you," she said, her words cutting through the sound of rainfall. "Now it's our turn." Matt tried to pull himself up, but the wet surface made it impossible to gain purchase. His clothes quickly became soaked as rain pounded down, plastering his hair to his face and turning the world into a blur of grey and shadow. Through the window, he could see James turning away, shoulders hunched against the weight of his betrayal. "Please," Matt called out one last time, his voice barely audible over the storm. "James." "Sarah, don't do this," but the door closed with finality, the porch light clicking off seconds later, leaving him in darkness broken only by occasional flashes of lightning. For hours, Matt dragged himself along the sidewalk, his arms burning with effort, the rough concrete tearing at his clothes and skin. Each inch forward was a battle against exhaustion and despair. The rain never let up, turning the simple act of movement into an ordeal of survival. Passing cars splashed through puddles, their headlights illuminating his struggle without stopping. The few pedestrians who hurried past with umbrellas either pretended not to see him or quickened their pace, unwilling to become involved in what they perceived as someone else's tragedy. Matt's world narrowed to the next foot of concrete, the next painful pull forward, the next desperate attempt to keep moving despite every reason to give up. As midnight approached, the rain finally began to ease, but Matt's strength was failing. His fingers were bloody from dragging himself across rough pavement, his clothes torn and soaked through. The backpack Sarah had thrown out with him lay abandoned blocks behind, its contents as useless as her pretense of mercy in packing it. In the distance, headlights approached, slowing as they neared his position. Matt barely had the energy to lift his head, unsure whether to hope for rescue or fear further cruelty. The sound of a car door opening cut through the night, followed by footsteps approaching through puddles. A man's voice, filled with genuine concern, broke through the haze of pain and exhaustion. "Dear God, what happened to you?" Nathan Walker had been driving home from another late night at his law firm when he spotted the figure on the sidewalk. At first he thought his tired mind was playing tricks on him. Surely that couldn't be a child dragging himself through the rain. But as his headlights illuminated the scene more clearly, the reality of what he was seeing hit him like a physical blow. The boy was soaked to the bone, his clothes torn and muddy, hands raw and bleeding from pulling himself along the concrete. Nathan's heart, hardened by years of dealing with society's worst cases, cracked at the sight. He pulled his car over, ignoring the rain that immediately drenched his expensive suit as he rushed to the boy's side. "I'm Nathan," he said softly, crouching down to meet the boy's eyes. "Can you tell me your name?" His voice, usually sharp and commanding in courtrooms, gentled to a tone he hadn't used since his own son's passing. The boy looked up, revealing eyes that held both fear and a flicker of desperate hope. Matt came the whispered response, followed by a violent shiver that shook his entire frame. They threw me out. My wheelchair broke, and they said I was worthless without it." The words tumbled out between chattering teeth, each one striking Nathan like a hammer blow. Without hesitation, Nathan shrugged off his suit jacket, wrapping it around Matt's trembling shoulders. "I'm going to help you up now," he said, telegraphing his movements to avoid startling the boy. "Is it okay if I carry you to my car?" Matt nodded, too exhausted to do more than lean into the warmth of the first kind touch he'd felt in months. The drive to Nathan's home was quiet, broken only by the soft hum of the car's heater and Matt's gradually steadying breaths. Nathan kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching as the boy fought to stay awake in the back seat, his head nodding forward only to jerk up again in a pattern Nathan recognized from his own son's final days. Nathan's house was a stark contrast to the cold streets they'd left behind. Warm lights welcomed them through large windows, and the interior was designed with accessibility in mind: wide doorways, smooth floors, and gently sloping ramps instead of steps. It had been modified years ago for his son Michael, and maintained that way even after Michael's passing, as if Nathan had been unconsciously waiting for someone else who needed it. "You're safe now," Nathan assured as he carried Matt inside, noting how little the boy weighed. "Let's get you warm and dry first, then we can talk about what happened." He headed straight for the guest room that had once been Michael's, where everything was still arranged for someone with limited mobility. Matt remained silent as Nathan helped him into dry clothes, but his eyes widened at the sight of the room's features: the specialized bed, the grab bars, the carefully arranged furniture. You know about this," he finally said, gesturing vaguely at his legs. "You understand." Nathan nodded, his throat tight. "My son Michael. He needed similar accommodations. He's gone now, but I kept everything the way it was. Maybe some part of me knew someone else would need it someday." He busied himself adjusting pillows, hiding the emotion in his eyes. As Matt settled into the bed, exhaustion finally overtaking him, Nathan noticed fresh bruises on the boy's arms that couldn't have come just from dragging himself along the street. His lawyer's instincts kicked in, cataloging evidence of long-term abuse, but he pushed those thoughts aside for now. Tonight was about making Matt feel safe. "Tomorrow we'll figure everything out," Nathan promised, pulling the blanket up around Matt's shoulders. "But tonight, just rest. You're not alone anymore," he watched as Matt's eyes drifted closed, the tension finally leaving his face in sleep. Standing in the doorway, Nathan felt something he hadn't experienced since losing Michael Purpose. This wasn't just about helping a child in need, it was about redemption, about turning his own loss into something meaningful. As he quietly closed the door, leaving it open just a crack, Nathan made a silent vow this time: he wouldn't fail to protect the child who needed him. Late that night, after ensuring Matt was safely asleep, Nathan found himself drawn to a room he rarely entered. Behind a carefully locked door lay Michael's memorial walls covered with photographs, shelves lined with trophies from wheelchair basketball, and a piano that had fallen silent 3 years ago. The room was exactly as Michael had left it the day before the surgery that was supposed to give him a chance at a longer life. Michael had been born with muscular dystrophy, a diagnosis that shattered Nathan's world but never dimmed his son's spirit. While other parents dreamed of their children's athletic achievements, Nathan learned to celebrate different milestones: the first time Michael successfully navigated his wheelchair through a crowded school hallway, the day he mastered playing piano despite weakening muscles, the moment he was elected class president despite never being able to stand at a podium. Nathan sat at the piano, fingers hovering over keys that still held the memory of Michael's last performance. His son had insisted on playing at the school talent show just days before his surgery, performing an original composition he'd written about hope and perseverance. The standing ovation he received wasn't out of pity. Michael's talent had earned every clap, every cheer, every tear of appreciation. The surgery was supposed to be routine, a procedure to help with Michael's breathing. Nathan had signed the consent forms with optimism, believing in the doctor's assurances of minimal risk. He remembered Michael's last words before the anesthesia took effect: "Dad, when I wake up, can we finally plan that camping trip?" They had been adapting camping gear for months, determined to prove that disability wouldn't stop them from experiencing adventure. But Michael never woke up. A complication during surgery, something about an unexpected reaction to the anesthesia, and suddenly Nathan's world collapsed. The doctor's explanations blurred into meaningless medical jargon as Nathan watched the heart monitor flatline, his son's hand growing cold in his grip. The camping gear remained in their garage, a dust-covered reminder of promises unfulfilled. The aftermath was a blur of funeral arrangements and legal battles. Nathan, a successful lawyer who had always found strength in logic and reason, found himself unable to accept the statistical explanations for his son's death. He filed lawsuit after lawsuit, seeking not money but accountability, answers, something to fill the void Michael's absence left behind. His marriage didn't survive the grief. Emily, Michael's mother, couldn't bear to stay in a house filled with modifications that no longer served their purpose. She moved across the country, leaving Nathan alone with his guilt and the echoing emptiness of their accessible home. He threw himself into his work, taking on cases involving medical malpractice and disability rights, turning his pain into purpose. The piano gathered dust, but Nathan couldn't bring himself to move it. Michael had saved for months to buy sheet music, practicing until his muscles screamed in protest, determined to master each piece. His persistence had taught Nathan more about strength than any courtroom victory ever could. Now, finding Matt, another young boy failed by those who should have protected him, stirred memories Nathan had tried to bury. Looking at the last photo taken of Michael, smiling from his wheelchair after his final recital, Nathan felt tears he'd held back for years finally fall. The similarities between Michael and Matt were striking, not just their physical challenges, but the undimmed light in their eyes despite everything life had thrown at them. Where others might see tragedy, Nathan saw resilience. Running his hand along the piano's polished surface, Nathan made a decision. He wouldn't let fear of loss stop him from helping Matt. Michael had taught him that life's value wasn't measured in years or abilities, but in moments of connection, in victories small and large, in the courage to keep going when everything seemed impossible. "I couldn't save you, son," Nathan whispered to the empty room, "but maybe you sent Matt to me so I could save him." The idea brought a bittersweet smile to his face. Tomorrow he would begin the fight to protect Matt, drawing on every legal skill and life lesson Michael had taught him. His son's legacy would live on, not in dusty trophies and silent pianos, but in the chance to give another child the love and support they deserved. The morning news exploded with sensational headlines: "Disabled boy kidnapped by wealthy lawyer, father desperately searches for missing son, community rallies behind grieving family." Robert Thompson, who had abandoned his son months ago, suddenly emerged as the perfect picture of a concerned father, his tearful interviews playing on every local station. "My son was taken from his loving home," Robert declared to a crowd of reporters gathered outside his new house, Sarah standing supportively at his side. "This man, Nathan Walker, has no right to him. Matt needs his real family." The cameras captured his perfectly rehearsed distress, while Sarah dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Nathan watched the morning news in disbelief, Matt sitting beside him at the breakfast table, both stunned by Robert's performance. The boy's hands trembled as he watched his father lie effortlessly to the cameras, rewriting their history of abandonment into a fiction of loving concern. "But he left," Matt whispered, his voice breaking. "He chose to leave." The police arrived at Nathan's door by mid-morning, responding to Robert's formal kidnapping complaint. They found no signs of coercion or abuse, only a well-maintained, accessible home and a boy who flinched at the mention of returning to his family. But public opinion, fueled by Robert's media campaign, had already begun to turn against Nathan. Local talk shows buzzed with speculation. "Can we trust this lawyer's motives?" they asked. "Why would a successful man take in a disabled child unless he had ulterior motives?" Robert's legal team painted Nathan as a grieving father who had lost his mind after his son's death, desperately trying to replace his loss by stealing another man's child. Sarah orchestrated candlelight vigils outside their home, carefully positioning James in camera shots as the heartbroken brother. "I just want my little brother back," James read from prepared statements, his delivery perfect, but his eyes refusing to meet the cameras. The community rallied around them, organizing search parties for a boy who wasn't lost. Nathan's law firm partners began distancing themselves, concerned about the negative publicity. Clients cancelled appointments, not wanting to be associated with an alleged kidnapper. Anonymous threats arrived in his mailbox, while social media exploded with hashtags demanding Matt's return to his real family. Through it all, Matt remained resolute. "I won't go back," he insisted when Nathan gently suggested that the legal fight might be too difficult. "They threw me away like garbage." You're the only one who saw me as a person." His words strengthened Nathan's resolve, but the pressure continued mounting. Robert's team leaked carefully selected photos to the press family portraits from before the accident, Matt smiling in his soccer uniform, Sarah helping with homework. They created a narrative of a perfect family disrupted by tragedy, carefully omitting the abuse, neglect, and abandonment that followed. Each new story twisted the truth further, making Nathan appear more villainous. The media camped outside Nathan's home, their cameras trained on windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of the kidnapped boy. Matt became a prisoner in his sanctuary, unable to even sit by windows without flashbulbs going off. The stress began taking its toll on both of them, but they found strength in protecting each other. One reporter, more aggressive than the others, managed to slip into Nathan's backyard, capturing photos of Matt practicing with his new wheelchair. The images were splashed across newspapers with headlines suggesting Nathan was parading his victim. The invasion of privacy left Matt shaking, memories of his former life's constant surveillance rushing back. Nathan's own past was dredged up and distorted. Michael's death became fodder for tabloids, with pseudo-experts analyzing his grief and suggesting he was attempting to replace his dead son. Every aspect of his life was scrutinized and twisted to fit the narrative Robert had created. But in the quiet moments between media storms, when Matt would smile at something as simple as being asked his preference for dinner or light up while exploring his new accessible bathroom, Nathan knew they had to fight. The truth was in these small moments, in Matt's growing confidence, in his decreasing flinches, in his willingness to voice opinions after years of silence. "They might have the media," Nathan told Matt one evening, as they watched another of Robert's performances on the news, "but we have the truth, and eventually the truth has to matter." Matt squeezed his hand in response, both of them drawing strength from their shared understanding that sometimes the hardest battles are fought not in courtrooms, but in the court of public opinion. The community's reaction was swift and merciless. Nathan's neighbors, who had once politely nodded in greeting, now crossed the street to avoid him. Curtains twitched as he passed, and whispered conversations died when he entered local shops. The carefully maintained illusion of suburban civility cracked, revealing the ugly prejudices beneath. The local church, where Nathan had once done pro bono legal work, publicly prayed for the safe return of Matthew Thompson to his loving family. The pastor, who had never once visited Matt during his months of abuse, now spoke passionately about family values and the sanctity of parental rights. The congregation nodded in righteous agreement, conveniently forgetting how they had ignored the signs of Matt's mistreatment. At the prestigious private school where Nathan served on the board, parents demanded his resignation. "We can't have someone like that associated with our children," they argued at emergency PTA meetings. The same parents who had praised Nathan's dedication to disability rights after Michael's death now questioned whether he was mentally stable enough to be near children. The grocery store where Nathan had shopped for years posted Robert's manufactured missing child posters in their windows. The cashier who had always commented on Nathan's kindness now refused to meet his eyes, sliding his change across the counter as if his touch might contaminate her. Matt's favorite cereal remained on the shelves, no longer added to their shopping cart for fear of public confrontation. Social media became a battlefield. Local Facebook groups filled with posts analyzing Nathan's every move. Amateur detectives scrutinized old photos of Michael, comparing them to Matt, suggesting Nathan was living out some twisted fantasy of replacing his dead son. Each theory grew more outlandish than the last, but in the echo chamber of community gossip, even the most bizarre accusations found believers. The hate mail began arriving daily. Anonymous letters filled with biblical quotes about honoring one's parents and warnings about divine punishment. Some contained thinly veiled threats, suggesting Nathan's house might accidentally catch fire. Others, perhaps more cruel, expressed fake sympathy for his loss of Michael, suggesting he needed psychiatric help rather than someone else's child. Even Nathan's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Anderson, who had brought them cookies when they first moved in and had known Michael, turned against them. She called the police one afternoon, claiming she heard suspicious noises from Nathan's house. The officers who responded found only Matt practicing his physiotherapy exercises, but the incident made the local news, adding fuel to Robert's narrative. The final blow came from Nathan's own country club, where he had been a member for 15 years. The board sent a carefully worded letter suspending his membership, citing community concerns and the club's reputation. The same people who had attended Michael's funeral and praised Nathan's strength now couldn't distance themselves fast enough. Matt watched it all with a mixture of guilt and anger. "It's my fault," he said one evening, after another neighbor had hurriedly ushered their children inside at the sight of them. "They're punishing you because of me." Nathan's heart broke at the familiar self-blame in Matt's voice, the same tone he had used when describing Sarah's abuse. "No," Nathan replied firmly, kneeling beside Matt's wheelchair. "They're punishing us because it's easier than admitting they failed you. Every person who looks away now is someone who looked away before, when you really needed help. Their guilt is making them cruel." Yet the isolation wore on them both. The accessible park where they had started taking evening walks became off-limits after other parents began filming them on their phones, posting the videos with suggestive captions. Matt's physiotherapy sessions moved entirely in-house after protesters started gathering outside the rehabilitation center. The community's rejection was a constant reminder of how quickly people could turn, how thin the veneer of civilization really was. Each day brought new challenges: cancelled deliveries, vandalized mailboxes, suspicious cars lingering outside their home. The pressure to give in, to return Matt to his real family, mounted with every passing hour. But in their forced isolation, something unexpected happened. The bond between Nathan and Matt grew stronger. Each act of community rejection became another brick in the foundation of their trust. They developed private jokes about the ridiculous headlines, found strength in their shared understanding of what real family meant. "They don't know us" became their mantra, spoken in quiet moments when the weight of public opinion seemed overwhelming. "They don't know the truth." And in those words they found the resolve to face another day, another accusation, another betrayal, knowing that eventually the truth would have to matter more than convenient lies. The transformation of Nathan's house from a shrine to grief into a home filled with life happened gradually, marked by small but significant moments. It began one morning when Nathan discovered Matt struggling to reach a bowl in the kitchen cabinet. Without hesitation, he rearranged the entire kitchen, placing everything at wheelchair height, just as he had once done for Michael, but this time without the weight of sadness clouding the gesture. Their first real breakthrough came during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and filled the night with flashes of lightning. Nathan found Matt trembling in his room, memories of the night he was abandoned flooding back. Instead of empty reassurances, Nathan wheeled Matt to the kitchen, where they spent the night making hot chocolate and sharing stories. Nathan spoke about Michael for the first time in years, while Matt opened up about his life before the accident. The storm became background noise to their growing connection. Breakfast became their sacred time. Nathan learned that Matt liked his eggs scrambled but barely set, a preference Sarah had always ignored. Matt discovered that Nathan hummed old jazz tunes while cooking, a habit that made him smile every morning. They developed a routine of Matt setting the table while Nathan cooked, working in comfortable synchronization that felt increasingly natural. The piano in Michael's room, dust-covered and silent for years, became their next milestone. Nathan found Matt looking at it one afternoon, fingers hovering over the keys without touching them. "I always wanted to learn," Matt admitted quietly. That evening, Nathan brought in a piano teacher who specialized in adaptive techniques. The sound of music, halting at first but growing more confident, began to fill the house again. Their evenings often found them in the home office, where Nathan worked on legal cases while Matt did his homework. They developed a system of subtle checks, Nathan glancing up to ensure Matt wasn't struggling, Matt watching Nathan's coffee cup to make sure he didn't work too late. The comfortable silence between them spoke volumes about their growing trust. Weekends became adventures in adaptation. Nathan's engineering mind and legal resources combined with Matt's determination to overcome physical barriers. They modified game controllers so Matt could join online gaming communities, designed a special holder for his phone, and created a system for him to independently access his art supplies. Each successful adaptation was celebrated with high fives and proud grins. The first time Matt called Nathan Dad was unplanned and natural. They were working on a science project, building a model solar system that accommodated Matt's limited motor skills. As they figured out a way to attach the planets using a system of magnets, Matt excitedly exclaimed, "Dad, we did it!" Both froze for a moment, but Nathan's warm smile and gentle squeeze of Matt's shoulder said everything necessary about acceptance and belonging. Physical therapy sessions became team efforts. Nathan researched extensively, working with Matt's therapist to understand every exercise. On difficult days, when Matt's body refused to cooperate, Nathan would share stories about Michael's determination, not as a comparison but as inspiration. "You both have the same spirit," he'd say, helping Matt through one more repetition. They developed their own language of support. A raised eyebrow from Matt meant he needed help but didn't want to ask directly. A particular type of silence from Nathan signaled he was missing Michael but trying to stay strong. They learned to read each other's moods, anticipate needs, and provide comfort without words. Their most intimate conversations happened during evening wheelchair maintenance. As Nathan checked brake tension and wheel alignment, Matt would talk about his fears of being sent back, of not being good enough, of being a replacement for Michael. Nathan would respond with honest reassurances, acknowledging his own fears while affirming their growing bond. These quiet moments, accompanied by the soft click of tools and gentle whir of spinning wheels, became their time for absolute honesty. The house itself seemed to adapt to their relationship. Photos of Michael remained, but they were joined by new pictures. Matt at his first piano recital, both of them covered in flour from a failed baking experiment, candid shots of them laughing together. The wheelchair ramps and adaptive devices no longer felt like memorials to loss, but rather celebrations of possibility. Even their setbacks strengthened their bond. When Matt caught the flu, Nathan stayed up for 3 nights straight, monitoring his fever and telling stories until Matt fell asleep. When Nathan lost an important case, Matt ordered pizza, using his carefully saved allowance, and insisted on a movie marathon to cheer him up. They learned that vulnerability shared was strength multiplied. During a particularly difficult physical therapy session, Matt finally voiced his deepest fear: "Are you sure I'm not just a replacement for Michael?" Nathan's response came from the heart: "You're not a replacement, Matt. Michael taught me how to be a father, and you're teaching me how to be one again. You're both my sons, different but equally loved." The most powerful moments were often the quietest. Nathan automatically adjusting Matt's blanket while passing his room at night, Matt saving the crossword puzzle's hardest clues for Nathan to solve over breakfast, the synchronized rhythm they developed moving through their daily routines. These small gestures, more than any grand declarations, showed how completely their lives had intertwined. Their bond was forged not just in big moments but in thousands of small ones, shared jokes that needed no explanation, comfortable silences on rainy afternoons, the way they could communicate entire conversations with just a look. They weren't trying to recreate what was lost, but building something new, a relationship that honored the past while embracing their present reality. The piano sat like a silent guardian in Michael's old room, its polished surface reflecting the afternoon light that streamed through the windows. For weeks, Matt had watched it from the doorway, drawn to its presence but hesitant to approach. One quiet Sunday, Nathan found him sitting before it, his fingers hovering uncertainly over the keys. "Michael used to play every day," Nathan said softly, rolling Matt's wheelchair closer to the piano. "He believed music was a language everyone could speak, regardless of their physical limitations. Without pressure or expectation, Nathan lifted the cover, revealing keys that hadn't been touched in years. Would you like to try? Their first attempt was awkward. Matt's fingers, stiff from lack of use, stumbled over the simplest notes. But something in the sound, even discordant, sparked a light in his eyes that Nathan hadn't seen before. That evening, Nathan made a call to MS. Eleanor Hayes, a music therapist who had worked with Michael, specializing in adaptive techniques for disabled musicians. Eleanor arrived with a wealth of experience and infinite patience. She began by modifying the piano bench to accommodate Matt's wheelchair, ensuring proper posture and reach. Music isn't about what you can't do, she explained, positioning Matt's hands. It's about discovering what you can. She started with simple exercises, teaching Matt to rely on his stronger left hand while gradually building strength in his right. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. During one session, while practicing scales, Matt began humming a melody, something original, haunting in its simplicity. Eleanor recognized raw talent in those few notes. She taught him to record melodies on his phone when they came to him, building a library of his musical thoughts. Progress wasn't linear. There were days when Matt's fingers refused to cooperate, when frustration brought tears and the temptation to quit loomed large. Nathan would sit beside him during these moments, sharing stories of Michael's own struggles and triumphs. He once spent 3 weeks mastering a single measure, Nathan recalled, but he never gave up. Eleanor introduced them to adaptive music technology software that could help compensate for Matt's physical limitations while allowing his creativity to flourish. They installed a digital interface that connected to the piano, enabling Matt to compose even when his hands were too tired to play traditionally. The fusion of classical instrument and modern technology opened new possibilities. Matt's first complete composition emerged after 2 months of practice. It was a simple piece he titled Rain, inspired by the night Nathan had found him. The melody carried echoes of loneliness but resolved into hope, telling his story through music in ways words never could. When he played it for Nathan, both were moved to tears, not from sadness, but from the recognition of healing expressed through art. Word of Matt's developing talent spread through Eleanor's network of music educators. She arranged for him to attend a workshop for young musicians with disabilities. There, Matt met others like him, pianists who played with one hand, violinists who used adaptive bows, singers who performed from wheelchairs. He returned home with renewed determination and a sense of belonging to a community that understood him. The piano became Matt's sanctuary. On difficult days, when memories of Sarah and Robert threatened to overwhelm him, he would lose himself in music. Nathan often found him there, working through his emotions note by note. The melodies that emerged were sometimes dark, sometimes hopeful, but always honest. Through music, Matt found his voice. Their home filled with sound scales in the morning, practice sessions after school, impromptu concerts during dinner. Nathan installed recording equipment, capturing Matt's progress and compositions. They started a tradition of Sunday afternoon performances where Matt would share his latest pieces, just as Michael had once done. Eleanor suggested entering Matt in a young composers competition. The theme was overcoming, and Matt spent weeks perfecting his entry. He composed a piece called Wheels in Motion, incorporating the rhythmic mixed sounds of his wheelchair into the melody. The composition told his story from abandonment to acceptance, from silence to song. The competition day brought challenges. The venue's accessibility was questionable, and some participants' parents cast doubtful looks at the boy in the wheelchair. But when Matt began to play, the room fell silent. His music spoke of resilience, of finding beauty in broken places, of building new dreams from shattered ones. The standing ovation that followed wasn't out of pity, it was pure recognition of talent. Matt didn't win first place, but he received special recognition for innovative composition. More importantly, he gained confidence in his ability to move others through his music. He told Nathan after the competition, "I used to think being in this chair meant I couldn't do anything important. But when I play, People don't see the wheelchair anymore, they just hear me." Eleanor began incorporating Matt's story and compositions into her presentations at music therapy conferences. His journey from trauma to artistic expression became an inspiration for other young musicians facing similar challenges. Matt started receiving letters from disabled children who wanted to learn music, each one reminding him that his impact reached beyond the piano. The transformation was profound. Through music, Matt found not just a hobby but a calling. His compositions became more complex, weaving together classical training and personal experience. Nathan watched with pride as his son, for that's what Matt had truly become, discovered his own way of adding beauty to the world. Robert Thompson's PR campaign reached new heights of manipulation when he discovered Matt's musical performances on social media. What should have been a private moment of triumph, Matt playing his composition at a local competition, became ammunition in Robert's crusade to portray himself as a grieving father desperate to reunite with his talented son. "My boy, my precious boy," Robert wept convincingly for news cameras, standing in front of a grand piano strategically placed in his living room. "I was the one who first noticed his love for music. I always wanted to buy him a piano, but then that man took him away." The piano, barely touched and hastily purchased for the interview, gleamed behind him as a prop in his performance. Sarah, ever the perfect supporting actress, orchestrated a series of remembrance concerts, claiming they were tributes to Matt's lost childhood. She hired young pianists to perform while projecting childhood photos of Matt on large screens. The events, heavily covered by local media, painted a picture of a loving family torn apart, carefully omitting any mention of the abuse and abandonment that had driven Matt to flee. James was forced to take piano lessons, appearing in carefully staged photos practicing at the same grand piano. "I'm learning to play so I can perform with my brother when he comes home," he told reporters, reading from scripts Sarah had prepared. The forced smile and mechanical delivery went unnoticed by journalists eager for emotional soundbites. Robert hired a prestigious PR firm that specialized in human interest stories. They crafted a narrative of a devoted father struggling to maintain his son's musical legacy, suggesting that Nathan was suppressing Matt's talent. Social media campaigns featuring hashtags like Bring Matt Tom and Let Matt Play flooded local networks, each post a carefully constructed piece of emotional manipulation. The campaign took a darker turn when Robert began appearing at children's music events, presenting himself as an advocate for young musicians with disabilities. "Every child deserves a chance to pursue their dreams," he would declare, voice breaking right on cue, especially those facing challenges like my son. The irony of his previous neglect was lost on his growing audience of supporters. Local music stores were persuaded to display posters featuring Matt's childhood photos alongside sheet music and instruments. Robert gave interviews about the healing power of music and how he had always encouraged Matt's artistic expression. Claims that made Matt physically ill when he saw them on the evening news. Each lie added another layer to the elaborate fiction Robert was creating. The campaign reached its peak when Robert announced the creation of the Matthew Thompson Musical Foundation for Disabled Youth, a supposed non-profit organization that claimed to provide instruments and lessons to disabled children. The foundation, more PR stunt than charitable endeavor, served primarily as a platform for Robert to present himself as a philanthropist while further exploiting his son's story. Sarah organized candlelight vigils where supporters would gather to play music, sending love to Matt. These events, complete with professional photographers and news crews, featured Sarah and Robert holding hands while James performed simple melodies on a portable keyboard. The images were designed to tug at heartstrings while reinforcing their false narrative of family unity. Behind the scenes, Robert's legal team worked to paint Nathan as an obstacle to Matt's musical development. They filed motions claiming that Nathan was isolating Matt from the musical community and denying him his artistic heritage. Each legal document was strategically leaked to sympathetic journalists, feeding the public's growing perception of Nathan as the villain in their story. The Puerto Rico campaign even co-opted Matt's competition piece Wheels in Motion, with Robert claiming it was a cry for help. Listen to the longing in those notes, he told a morning talk show host, wiping away staged tears. My son is calling out to me through his music. Music critics were hired to analyze the composition, finding meanings that supported Robert's narrative while ignoring the piece's actual message of independence and growth. As Matt's reputation in the music community grew, Robert's campaign intensified. He began appearing at the same competitions and events Matt was scheduled to attend, forcing Nathan to withdraw Matt's participation to protect him from confrontation. Each withdrawal was then publicized as evidence of Nathan's controlling behavior, further distorting the truth. The reality that Matt's musical talent had blossomed only after escaping Robert's neglect was buried under an avalanche of PR-crafted fiction. Every note Matt played, every composition he created, was twisted by Robert's campaign into a weapon against the very person who had actually nurtured his gift. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom glittered with chandeliers and false promises on the night of Robert's carefully orchestrated charity gala. An evening of hope. The Matthew Thompson Foundation for Disabled Youth read the elegant banner spanning the entrance. Inside, wealthy donors mingled with local celebrities, their conversations punctuated by the soft classical music played by a string quartet. Robert Thompson stood at the center of it all, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo, playing the role of devoted father with Oscar-worthy precision. Sarah floated through the crowd in a designer gown, expertly weaving the tale of their family's tragedy to anyone who would listen. James, uncomfortable in his formal wear, stood by the grand piano that dominated the stage, a prop in his father's elaborate production. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert's voice carried across the hushed room. Tonight we gather not just to raise funds, but to raise awareness. His practiced pause allowed photographers to capture his expression of carefully crafted grief. My son Matt, whose musical talent bloomed despite his disability, was taken from us. But through this foundation we ensure that other disabled children won't lose their chance to shine. The crowd murmured sympathetically as a slideshow began playing on large screens throughout the ballroom. Images of Matt's childhood flashed by carefully selected photos that painted a picture of family harmony while conveniently omitting the years of neglect. Each picture was accompanied by captions that rewrote history: Matt's first piano lesson, that never happened, family music night staged after Matt left, father and son duet completely fabricated. Sarah took the stage next, tears glistening perfectly under the spotlights. We've established a scholarship program, she announced, her voice trembling on cue, to provide musical instruments and lessons to disabled children. Each recipient will be known as a Matthews musician, carrying forward the legacy of my beloved stepson. The irony of her words, given her previous cruelty to Matt, was lost on the applauding audience. The evening reached its theatrical peak when James was called to perform. He sat at the piano, his discomfort visible only to those who truly knew him, and began playing a simple piece. Robert stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. This song was composed by Matt. James learned it to feel closer to his brother. It was, in fact, a popular classical piece, not Matt's composition at all, but the audience was too moved by the performance to question its authenticity. Local media covered the event extensively, their cameras capturing every calculated gesture and rehearsed tear. Celebrity guests posed with Robert and Sarah, holding oversized checks and making grand promises of support. Each interaction was choreographed to reinforce the narrative of a loving family torn apart, rather than the truth of their abandonment. The Foundation's first official act was the announcement of a music therapy program at the local children's hospital, the same hospital where they had neglected to take Matt for proper care after his accident. Robert presented the program as a tribute to his son's resilient spirit, while carefully avoiding any mention of his own role in Matt's suffering. Between performances and speeches, video testimonials played from various supporters, teachers who had never actually taught Matt, doctors who had never treated him, and musicians who had never met him. Each told carefully scripted stories that aligned with Robert's version of events, creating a tapestry of lies so intricate it began to feel like truth. The event reached its crescendo when Robert unveiled a bronze plaque bearing Matt's image, and a quote he had never said music heals all wounds. The plaque was to be installed at the entrance of a new music therapy center, a center that existed only in architectural renderings and PR materials. The audience rose in a standing ovation, moved by what they perceived as a father's dedication to his son's legacy. As the evening drew to a close, Robert made his final appeal, his voice breaking at precisely the right moments. Every donation tonight not only helps disabled children find their voice through music, but brings us one step closer to reuniting our family. My son's talent was a gift, and though he's been taken from us, his spirit lives on through this foundation. The charity gala raised over $500,000 that night, none of which would actually reach disabled children in need. Instead, the funds would disappear into a maze of administrative costs and consulting fees, while Robert's PR team used the event's success to further legitimize their campaign against Nathan. Behind the scenes, away from the cameras and adoring crowds, Robert allowed himself a satisfied smile. The event had achieved its real purpose, not to help disabled children, but to strengthen his public image as a caring father and undermine Nathan's custody of Matt. As the last guests departed, leaving behind empty champagne glasses and hollow promises, Robert's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculated coldness beneath. Just as Robert's self-congratulatory speech reached its crescendo, the distinct sound of helicopter blades cut through the carefully orchestrated atmosphere of the charity gala. The chandeliers trembled slightly, causing the crystal drops to tinkle ominously. Through the ballroom's massive windows, spotlights from above pierced the evening darkness, drawing every eye skyward. Nathan Walker's entrance was precisely timed, the result of weeks of careful planning and coordination with investigative journalists who had been quietly building a case against Robert. The helicopter, borrowed from a media contact, landed on the hotel's designated helipad, its dramatic arrival sending ripples of murmurs through the assembled crowd. Nathan emerged from the aircraft with purpose in his stride, carrying a leather briefcase that held the ammunition to destroy Robert's carefully constructed facade. Behind him came a team of reporters from major networks, their cameras rolling to capture every moment. Security personnel, caught off guard by the legitimate press credentials, could only watch as Nathan and his entourage made their way to the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nathan's voice boomed through the sound system, commandeered by pre-positioned allies, "I apologize for interrupting this evening of carefully crafted lies." The microphone in his hand gave him command of the room, while Robert stood frozen on stage, his mask of paternal concern cracking under the unexpected assault. Sarah attempted to signal security, but Nathan was already pulling documents from his briefcase, distributing them to key journalists in the crowd. "What you're receiving are bank records, medical reports, and sworn testimonies that tell the true story of Matt Thompson's life under Robert's care, or more accurately, his neglect." The first bombshell dropped when Nathan played a video on the ballroom screens, hijacking the presentation system. Security footage from their old house showed Sarah forcing Matt to crawl across the floor after his wheelchair had been deliberately damaged. The timestamp matched dates when Robert had been present in the home, destroying his claims of ignorance about the abuse. "Your foundation claims to support disabled children," Nathan continued, his voice carrying years of accumulated evidence and righteous anger. "But let's talk about the real numbers." He projected financial records showing how Robert had systematically drained Matt's medical trust fund, diverting money meant for his care into personal accounts. More evidence followed: photographs of Matt's untreated injuries, documented instances of medical neglect, and school records showing patterns of unexplained absences that coincided with visible bruising. Each revelation landed like a physical blow, stripping away the veneer of Robert's charitable persona. The most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. James, standing forgotten by the piano, suddenly found his voice. "It's all true," he said, stepping forward to take the microphone Nathan offered. "I watched it happen. I helped it happen. And I can't live with the lies anymore." His unscripted confession, born of months of guilt, carried more weight than any prepared statement. Robert attempted to regain control, stepping forward with his practiced smile. "This is clearly a desperate attempt to discredit our charitable work," he began, but Nathan was ready. The screens filled with footage from hidden cameras, showing Robert and Sarah rehearsing their emotional appeals, coaching James on his lines, and laughing about how easily people were fooled by their performance. Nathan's masterstroke came in the form of audio recordings. Sarah's voice filled the ballroom, cruel and unfiltered, berating Matt for his disability. Robert could be heard in the background, offering no objection to her treatment of his son. The dates on the recordings corresponded with public appearances where they had played the roles of devoted parents. The assembled donors, many of whom had written substantial checks that evening, began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. The evidence was irrefutable, the contrast between Robert's public persona and private actions too stark to ignore. Phones emerged from pockets and purses as the story spread across social media in real time. The Matthew Thompson Foundation, Nathan declared, is built on the suffering of the very child it claims to honor. Every dollar donated tonight would serve only to legitimize years of abuse and neglect. He turned to face Robert directly. "You abandoned your son when he needed you most, and now you dare to use his name to build your reputation." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert's attempts to speak were met with hostile stares from the crowd he had so recently charmed. Sarah's perfectly composed facade crumbled as cameras captured her genuine reaction, not grief or concern, but fury at being exposed. James, finally free from the weight of complicity, stood next to Nathan, a physical representation of truth triumphing over deception. As if orchestrated by fate itself, the ballroom doors opened one final time. Matt wheeled himself in, his presence commanding attention not through theatrics but through quiet dignity. The contrast between the real Matt, confident, talented, and thriving under Nathan's care, and the victim portrayed in Robert's campaign was stark and undeniable. In the stunned silence that followed Matt's entrance, Nathan opened a final digital file on the ballroom screens. "What you're about to see," he announced, "is the complete truth about the accident that changed Matt's life." The footage, obtained from traffic cameras and enhanced by forensic experts, showed Robert's SUV speeding through residential streets on the day of Matt's soccer game. The timestamps proved devastating. Robert hadn't been rushing to see his son play, he had been fleeing from a meeting with his mistress, now identified as Sarah, who had been his secret companion months before the accident. Text messages displayed on screen showed their exchanges, Sarah demanding he leave the game early to meet her, Robert's increasingly frantic responses as he tried to juggle his double life. The accident that confined Matt to a wheelchair, Nathan continued, his voice tight with controlled anger, wasn't just a tragedy, it was the direct result of Robert's choices. Medical records appeared next, showing that Robert had tested positive for alcohol in his system that day, a fact that had been buried in confidential settlement agreements. Sarah's role in the cover-up emerged through a trail of emails. She had orchestrated the legal settlements, threatening hospital staff with lawsuits if they revealed Robert's intoxication. Her correspondence with insurance companies showed how she had manipulated claim payments, diverting funds meant for Matt's care into private accounts. The evidence turned more personal as Nathan revealed Sarah's journal entries, discovered by a whistleblowing household employee. The entries detailed her systematic campaign to alienate Matt from his father, her calculated abuse disguised as tough love, and her ultimate goal of removing Matt from their lives to secure Robert's fortune for herself and James. Financial records painted a damning picture of the Foundation's true purpose. Of the donations already collected, 80% had been allocated to administrative costs, primarily PR fees, legal consultants, and luxury events like tonight's gala. Not a single dollar had reached any disabled child, despite the Foundation's claimed mission. James, finding courage in the momentum of truth, stepped forward to provide the final piece of evidence. From his pocket he withdrew a phone containing videos he had secretly recorded Sarah coaching him on his public statements, Robert rehearsing his tears for cameras, both of them laughing about how easily the public had been fooled by their performance of grief. The most damaging revelation came from Matt's old medical files. X-rays and examination notes showed injuries inconsistent with neglect-alone evidence of deliberate harm that had been explained away as accidents. Sarah's fingerprints were all over the reports, her signature authorizing minimal treatment while declining recommended therapies and equipment. Robert's attempts at damage control crumbled as Nathan projected the final piece of evidence. Footage from the night Matt was thrown out. Security cameras from their old house captured Sarah's cruel eviction of a disabled child, while Robert watched from his study window, doing nothing to intervene. The timestamp showed near freezing temperatures, making their actions not just morally reprehensible but criminally negligent. As the evidence mounted, the ballroom's atmosphere transformed from shocked silence to audible outrage. Donors began tearing up their checks. Reporters who had once sympathetically covered Robert's campaign now turned their cameras on his increasingly panicked face. The carefully constructed facade of the caring father crumbled completely under the weight of irrefutable truth. Law enforcement officers, quietly summoned at the start of Nathan's presentation, emerged from the crowd. The evidence presented wasn't just damaging to Robert's reputation, it detailed multiple criminal offenses: fraud, child abuse, endangerment, and conspiracy. As they approached the stage, Robert's desperate glance toward the exits revealed exit routes already blocked by additional officers. The final moments of the revelation played out like scenes from a carefully orchestrated drama. Sarah's attempt to flee was blocked by guests who had once fawned over her tragic stepmother act. James, finally free from years of coerced complicity, handed over additional evidence he had kept hidden. And Matt, wheeling himself to Nathan's side, faced his former tormentors with quiet dignity that spoke louder than any evidence could. The aftermath of the charity gala revelation hit Matt harder than anyone anticipated. While the world celebrated the exposure of Robert and Sarah's deception, Matt retreated into a darkness that even Nathan struggled to penetrate. The full weight of his father's betrayal, learning that Robert had been drunk when he caused the accident, that his relationship with Sarah had predated the tragedy, proved too heavy for his young shoulders to bear. One quiet Sunday morning, Nathan found a note on Matt's pillow. The handwriting was shaky, but the message was clear: "I'm sorry for being the reason everything went wrong. Maybe if I had never been born, Dad would have been happy." The piano in Michael's room, usually alive with Matt's music, sat silent, the sheet music scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Panic seized Nathan as he searched the house, calling Matt's name with increasing desperation. He found the wheelchair abandoned in the upstairs bathroom, its position telling a horrific story. Matt had somehow pulled himself onto the window ledge, his legs dangling uselessly over the edge of the 3-story drop. The morning air bit cold against his skin as he stared down at the concrete below. Nathan called softly, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Please come back inside." He took a careful step forward, watching Matt's shoulders tense at the sound of movement. The boy didn't turn around, his fingers gripping the windowsill with white-knuckled intensity. "He was with her the day of the accident," Matt whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "He was drunk because he was celebrating their anniversary. I wasn't even worth staying sober for." A tear rolled down his cheek, dropping silently into the void below. "Everything that happened, the accident, Sarah's abuse, James turning against me, it was all because I existed." Nathan inched closer, close enough to feel the tremors running through Matt's body. "No, son," he said, the word son carrying all the weight of his love. "Their choices were their own. Your existence isn't a mistake, it's a gift. a gift to me, to music, to everyone whose life you've touched." Matt's shoulders began to shake with suppressed sobs. "But why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't he love me like you loved Michael?" The questions hung in the air, raw and painful. Nathan's heart broke at the comparison, understanding now how deeply Matt had internalized every rejection. "Because he wasn't worthy of your love," Nathan answered truthfully. "Some people aren't capable of loving purely, without conditions. That's their flaw, not yours." He was close enough now to reach out, his hand hovering near Matt's shoulder. "Please come down. We can face this together." For a moment that stretched into eternity, Matt remained motionless on the ledge. Then, slowly, he turned his head to look at Nathan. His eyes, filled with tears and torment, met Nathan's steady gaze. Something passed between them, an understanding, a connection, a lifeline of love throwing itself against the darkness. With a sob that seemed to come from his very soul, Matt reached for Nathan's outstretched hand. The movement was awkward, dangerous, but Nathan was ready. He pulled Matt back through the window in one swift motion, both of them collapsing onto the bathroom floor. Nathan wrapped his arms around Matt, holding him as he broke down completely. "I've got you," Nathan whispered, rocking Matt as he would have rocked Michael. "I've got you, and I'm never letting go." Matt's tears soaked through his shirt, each sob releasing years of pent-up pain and rejection. They stayed there on the cold tile floor, father and son, bound not by blood but by something stronger, the choice to love, to heal, to survive together. The county jail's visiting room was cold and sterile, but Sarah's smile was colder still as she faced Matt and Nathan across the scratched metal table. She had requested this meeting, claiming she wanted to apologize. Instead, her words dripped with venom, each syllable carefully chosen to inflict maximum pain. "You want to know the truth?" Sarah leaned forward, her handcuffs clinking against the table. "Starving you wasn't an accident. It wasn't neglect. It was a plan." Her eyes gleamed with a malicious satisfaction as she watched the color drain from Matt's face. "Every missed meal, every forgotten snack, every time I put the food just out of your reach, it was all calculated." Nathan's hand tightened protectively on Matt's shoulder, but Sarah continued, seemingly eager to unburden herself of her cruelty. "I thought if you got sick enough, weak enough, maybe you'd just fade away. Natural causes, they'd call it. No one questions when a disabled child's health deteriorates." She smiled, a twisted expression that held no warmth. "Your father would have been sad, of course, but I would have been there to comfort him." Matt sat frozen in his wheelchair, each word hitting like a physical blow. "The days I left you alone without food," Sarah continued, almost conversational in tone. "I told the school you were sick. I told the neighbors you were resting. I told your father you had eaten earlier. Everyone believed me the devoted stepmother, sacrificing everything to care for a disabled child." Her confession grew more detailed, more horrifying. She described how she would prepare elaborate meals for James while Matt listened from his room, stomach cramping with hunger. How she deliberately served food in heavy dishes he couldn't lift, then punished him for spilling. How she kept meticulous records of his weight loss, disguising it as medical documentation. The worst part, Sarah laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the prison walls. "The worst part is that you were too proud to complain, too afraid of being an even bigger burden. You just accepted it, like you accepted everything else. Such a good, quiet little boy, slowly disappearing before everyone's eyes." Nathan started to stand, his face contorted with rage, but Matt's hand on his arm stopped him. "Why are you telling us this now?" Matt asked, his voice steady despite the tremors running through his body. "Why confess?" Sarah's mask slipped for a moment, revealing something ugly and desperate beneath. "Because I want you to know that even though you survived, even though you're here with your new daddy, a part of you will always remember those hungry nights. A part of you will always be that weak, starving child wondering why no one noticed, why no one cared." Matt wheeled his chair back from the table, straightening his spine with dignity that made Sarah's cruelty seem small and pathetic. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "Those memories don't make me weak, they make me stronger. They remind me that I survived you." As guards led Sarah away, her final words echoed through the visiting room. "You'll never forget me, Matt. Every time you eat, every time you need help with food, you'll remember who taught you what hunger really means." Matt and Nathan left the prison in silence, but when they reached their car, Matt spoke with unexpected clarity. "She wanted to break me one last time, but she failed. She's always failed." Nathan hugged his son close, feeling the strength that Sarah had never managed to starve out of him. The truth about Matt's abuse spread through the community like wildfire, forcing neighbors, teachers, and friends to confront their own complicity in his suffering. The signs had been there: a too thin boy in a deteriorating wheelchair, unexplained absences from school, haunted eyes that never quite met anyone's gaze, yet they had all chosen to look away. Mrs. Anderson, the neighbor who had once called the police on Nathan, sat in her living room surrounded by untouched plates of cookies she used to bake. Through her window she had witnessed Matt struggling to reach food, had heard his stomach growling during chance encounters, yet she had convinced herself it wasn't her place to intervene. Now her cookies crumbled under trembling fingers as she wrote a letter of apology she wasn't sure she had the courage to send. At Matt's old school, teachers held an emergency meeting that dissolved into tears and recriminations. His former math teacher recalled the day Matt had fainted in class, how easily she had accepted Sarah's explanation of a stomach bug, despite the boy's visible malnutrition. The school nurse remembered bandaging his precious sores, noticing their severity but filing her concerns away in a drawer that remained unopened until too late. The local church congregation, which had so fervently supported Robert's false narrative, now sat in uncomfortable silence as their pastor delivered a sermon on the sin of willful blindness. The same people who had organized prayer vigils for Matt's return now struggled with the knowledge that their actions had helped perpetuate his abuse. The country club that had suspended Nathan's membership sent a formal letter of reinstatement, accompanied by a substantial donation to legitimate children's charities. But the gesture felt hollow, a transparent attempt to cleanse their collective conscience. The same board members who had once shunned Nathan now couldn't meet his eyes in the street. Most painful was the reaction of Matt's former friend's parents, who had gradually stopped inviting him for playdates after his accident. They had accepted Sarah's excuses without question, had taught their children through example that disability was something to avoid, something uncomfortable to be ignored. Their children now asked difficult questions they struggled to answer. Local media, which had eagerly amplified Robert and Sarah's lies, published retractions and apologies, but their words couldn't erase the months of headlines that had painted Nathan as a kidnapper and Matt as a victim of the wrong crime. Reporters who had once camped outside Nathan's house now slunk away, their cameras lowered in shame. The community's guilt manifested in awkward attempts at recompense. Casseroles appeared on Nathan's doorstep, anonymous donations were made in Matt's name, and offers of help arrived too late to matter. Each gesture, while well-intentioned, served only to highlight how simple it would have been to offer assistance when Matt truly needed it. In the end, it was Matt himself who addressed the community's shame, at a town hall meeting called to discuss healing and moving forward. He wheeled himself to the microphone and spoke words that would haunt his neighbors for years to come. "Your guilt doesn't help me heal, but your awareness might help the next child who needs someone to speak up." The silence that followed his statement hung heavy with understanding. The community had failed not just Matt, but their own values, their own humanity. As they left the meeting hall that evening, each person carried with them the weight of a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest cruelty lies not in active malice, but in the passive choice to look away. The courthouse was packed on the day the final piece of evidence against Robert Thompson was presented. Security footage from a local bar, dated the afternoon of Matt's accident, painted a damning picture that no amount of PR spin could erase. The time-stamped video showed Robert downing drink after drink with Sarah, celebrating their secret relationship while his son waited at his soccer championship. The defendant left the establishment at 3:42 p.m., the prosecutor stated, her voice cutting through the hushed courtroom. Blood alcohol tests performed after the accident, which were deliberately suppressed, showed levels more than twice the legal limit. She paused, letting the information sink in. Mr. Thompson wasn't rushing to see his son play. He was rushing to create an alibi for his whereabouts. Text messages recovered from Robert's old phone revealed the twisted truth. Delete these messages he had written to Sarah minutes after the accident. Tell everyone I was heading to the game. No one can know we were together. The timestamps matched perfectly with emergency call records, showing Robert's first concern had been covering his tracks, not his son's condition. The surveillance footage from the soccer field was the most devastating. Multiple angles captured Robert's SUV swerving onto the field, but it was the enhanced audio that made several jurors gasp. Before impact, Robert could be clearly heard on his phone, "I'll handle this, Sarah. No one will ever know we were." The sentence was cut off by the sound of impact. A forensic reconstruction of the accident revealed that Robert had time to swerve away from Matt. The analysis showed 3 seconds where he could have turned the wheel, could have chosen a different path. Instead, whether from intoxication or panic, he had driven straight ahead, forever changing his son's life. Hospital staff came forward with suppressed records showing Robert's attempts to minimize Matt's care. Keep costs down, he had instructed doctors while Matt lay unconscious. No experimental treatments. His concern had been for his bank account, not his son's recovery. Meanwhile, text messages to Sarah continued. This complicates everything. We need to be more careful now. The most shocking revelation came from Robert's own laptop. Emails revealed he had researched institutions where he could send Matt, looking for options even before his son regained consciousness. "We can start fresh," he had written to Sarah. "No one needs to know about any of this. We can be together without complications." When confronted with the evidence, Robert's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. His confession, when it came, was as cold as his actions had been. "I saw him on the field," he admitted. "For a split second, I saw him. But all I could think about was how my life would be over if anyone discovered where I'd been, what I'd been doing. I chose Sarah. I chose my secret. I chose wrong." Matt sat in his wheelchair during the confession, Nathan's steady hand on his shoulder providing silent support. He watched his father crumble, not with satisfaction, but with a complex mixture of pain and relief. The truth, as ugly as it was, meant the end of lies, the end of wondering if he had somehow been at fault. Robert's final attempt at justification fell flat in the silent courtroom. "I was trapped," he declared. "Trapped between the life I had and the life I wanted. Matt was just." In the way the words hung in the air, their cruelty emphasized by their honesty. This was the real Robert Thompson, stripped of pretense, finally revealing the calculated selfishness that had driven every decision. As Robert was led away in handcuffs, he tried one last time to catch Matt's eye, perhaps seeking forgiveness or understanding. But Matt had already turned away, facing forward toward Nathan, toward his future. The truth of his accident, finally exposed, wasn't an ending but a beginning, the start of real healing, real understanding, and real love. The second day of testimony brought a revelation that stunned even the most seasoned courtroom observers. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just Robert's secret lover turned stepmother. She was a woman with a long history of targeting wealthy men with vulnerable children. Her real name was Sandra Blackwood, and she had left a trail of destroyed families across 3 states. The detective who uncovered her true identity presented a damning timeline. 5 years before meeting Robert Thompson, she married Daniel Foster, a widower with a disabled daughter. Within 18 months, the daughter was institutionalized, and Mr. Foster's fortune was drained through a series of clever manipulations. Photos showed Sarah, then Sandra, with different hair, different names, but the same calculating smile. birth records revealed that she had never legally changed her name to Sarah Mitchell. It was just one of many aliases she had used, each one crafted to present herself as the perfect stepmother figure to vulnerable families. Bank statements showed how she had systematically transferred Matt's medical trust fund into offshore accounts, preparing for her next disappearance. Most chilling were the diary entries found in a storage unit rented under one of her aliases. "These men are all the same," she had written. "Show them a pretty face, sympathize with their struggles as single fathers, and they hand over everything. The disabled kids are the easiest targets, everyone's so quick to believe they're a burden, so grateful when someone offers to help." Matt listened to the evidence with a strange sense of relief. Her cruelty, which had once seemed personal, was revealed as something mechanical, practiced a con artist's routine, rather than a stepmother's hatred. Somehow this made it easier to bear. He wasn't specially chosen for torment, he had simply been her latest target. The prosecution presented interviews with her previous victims' families. A pattern emerged: she always chose widowers with children who needed special care. She would integrate herself into their lives gradually, positioning herself as the solution to their struggles. Once married, the abuse would begin subtle at first, then escalating as she isolated her victims from support systems. Her performance as the devoted stepmother at charity events took on a sinister new light. The foundation she had helped Robert establish wasn't her first. She had created similar schemes before, each designed to present a public image of selfless devotion while privately undermining her stepchildren's care. James, watching from the gallery, struggled to process how completely he had been manipulated. The woman he had thought of as his mother figure had been grooming him as a weapon against his brother, using his desire for approval to turn him into an unwitting accomplice in Matt's abuse. When confronted with her true identity, Sarah's mask finally slipped completely. "You people are so easy to fool," she sneered at the prosecutor. Wave a few tears, talk about the challenges of loving a disabled child, and suddenly you're a saint. Nobody looks too closely at a woman willing to take on damaged children. The courtroom fell silent at her casual cruelty, but Matt's voice cut through the shock. "You never fooled me," he said clearly. "I always knew you weren't really trying to be my mother. I just didn't know you were trying to be anyone's mother." His words, simple but profound, stripped away her last pretense of sophistication, revealing the hollow fraud beneath. After Sarah's true identity was exposed, James found himself adrift in a sea of guilt and regret. The carefully constructed reality he had lived in for years crumbled, leaving him face to face with the truth of his betrayal. Late one evening, he appeared at Nathan's door, rain-soaked and shaking, clutching a box of Matt's old belongings he had secretly saved. "I kept these," he whispered, pulling out faded photographs, soccer medals, and small treasures from their shared childhood. "Every time Sarah told me to throw something away, I hid it instead. I don't know why, maybe some part of me knew what we were doing was wrong." His hands trembled as he lifted out their mother's old music box, the one Sarah had claimed was lost. Matt wheeled himself closer, examining each item with quiet wonder. James knelt beside his brother's wheelchair, his voice breaking. "I was a coward," he confessed. "I watched her hurt you and I did nothing. I convinced myself it was normal, that you deserved it, because facing the truth meant admitting I had failed you as a brother." The transformation began slowly. James started spending afternoons at Nathan's house, initially sitting in awkward silence, then gradually finding his voice. He helped Matt with physical therapy, learning the proper ways to assist without overwhelming, his athletic training taking on new meaning as he supported his brother's exercises. During one particularly difficult session, when Matt struggled with a new movement, James finally broke down completely. "I used to brag about my sports trophies," he sobbed, "while you fought battles every day just to move, to live, to survive us. I was so blind, Matt, so stupidly, willfully blind." The brothers began rebuilding their relationship through music. James would sit beside the piano as Matt played, turning pages and learning the melodies. Sometimes he would bring his guitar, and they would attempt clumsy duets that gradually improved. The music became their language, speaking the words that were still too painful to voice. One afternoon, James arrived with a stack of notebooks, journals he had kept during the years of abuse. "I wrote everything down," he explained, handing them to Nathan. "Every incident, every cruel word, every time I chose to look away. Use them in court. Let my shame serve some purpose." The journals became key evidence in the ongoing case against Sarah and Robert. The healing wasn't smooth or easy. There were moments when old habits surfaced, a thoughtless word, a flinch, a flash of the entitled older brother James had been trained to be. But each time, he caught himself, acknowledged the mistake, and worked to do better. Matt's forgiveness, freely given but hard-earned, became his guide to redemption. James began volunteering at a local rehabilitation center, working with disabled children and their siblings. He shared his story openly, using his experience to help other families avoid the patterns of enabling and abuse he had fallen into. His athletic background found new purpose as he helped develop adaptive sports programs. The final testament to James's transformation came during a piano recital where Matt was performing his latest composition. As Matt played, James stood beside him, one hand resting supportively on the wheelchair, pride radiating from his face. In that moment, they were no longer victim and enabler, but simply brothers reunited through truth, healing, and love. The path to healing began in Nathan's garden, where 3 generations of pain finally found their resolution. On a warm spring afternoon, Nathan arranged a meeting that would change all their lives. Matt sat in his wheelchair among blooming flowers, James stood nervously by his side, and most surprisingly, Michael's mother Emily had flown in from across the country. Emily approached Matt first, her eyes filled with tears as she recognized in him the same quiet strength she had seen in her own son. "Nathan told me everything," she said softly, kneeling beside his wheelchair. "And watching you play Michael's piano through the videos he sent, it was like seeing hope reborn." She pulled out a small photo album, sharing memories of Michael that had been too painful to revisit until now. James listened intently as Emily spoke about caring for a disabled child, about the challenges and the profound joy that came with every small victory. Her words helped him understand what he had failed to see in his brother, not weakness, but extraordinary courage. "Michael never saw his wheelchair as a prison," Emily explained. "He saw it as his chariot, just like Matt does now." Nathan watched as his past and present families began to intertwine. Emily shared stories of Michael's determination that made Matt laugh in recognition, while James eagerly showed her videos of Matt's recent piano performances. The garden, which had once been Nathan's retreat for grieving, filled with the sound of shared laughter and understanding. The healing extended beyond just their immediate circle. Through Emily's connections with support groups for parents of disabled children, they began building a network of understanding and advocacy. James took a particular interest in working with siblings of disabled children, using his own journey from enabler to supporter as a powerful teaching tool. Matt found himself surrounded by a new kind of family, one built on choice rather than obligation. Emily became Aunt Eam, showing up for his recitals with homemade cookies that matched Michael's favorite recipe. James transformed from the brother who had looked away to the brother who never left his side, and Nathan, watching it all, felt Michael's memory become not a wound but a bridge that had led him to this new happiness. The most profound moment came when Emily discovered some of Michael's old compositions in her attic. She brought them to Matt, who adapted them for his style. During his next recital, Matt and James performed a duet, Matt on piano, James on guitar, playing a piece that blended Michael's melody with Matt's harmonies. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience as the music connected past and present, loss and love, grief and joy. Family isn't about blood, Nathan told them one evening as they sat together in the garden. It's about who stays when staying gets hard. It's about who chooses to love when loving requires courage. Matt reached for James's hand, while Emily squeezed Nathan's shoulder, the four of them forming a circle of healing that none of them had imagined possible. The garden became their gathering place, where weekly dinners turned into a tradition. Pictures of both Michael and Matt hung on the walls, telling stories not of replacement but of continuation. The piano played daily, carrying both boys' spirits in its notes. They had become something rare and beautiful, a family forged through pain but sustained by choice, understanding and unconditional love. The transformation of the community began with a simple piano recital that turned into a movement. Matt's story, combined with his musical talent, caught the attention of disability rights advocates nationwide. What started as a local event in the town hall grew into a powerful campaign for change. Nathan, drawing on his legal expertise, worked with advocacy groups to draft the Matthews Law, comprehensive legislation requiring regular welfare checks on disabled children and mandatory training for teachers and healthcare providers in recognizing signs of abuse. The law also established strict penalties for those who financially exploited disabled individuals or their trust funds. James became an unexpected champion for the cause, speaking at schools and community centers about the subtle ways abuse can be normalized and hidden. His candid accounts of his own transformation from enabler to advocate resonated particularly with families struggling to support disabled siblings. His sports connections brought athletic celebrities to disability awareness events, drawing mainstream attention to their cause. The community, seeking to make amends for their past blindness, rallied behind the initiative. Local businesses began implementing accessibility improvements without waiting for legal requirements. The school board revamped its policies, making inclusion and accommodation primary considerations rather than afterthoughts. The same country club that had once shunned Nathan now hosted monthly adaptive sports events. Matt's music school established a scholarship fund for disabled students, named in honor of both Matt and Michael. The program didn't just provide musical education, it created a support network for families facing similar challenges. Emily's experience as Michael's mother made her an invaluable mentor to parents just beginning their journey. The annual Keys for Change concert became the town's signature event, featuring disabled musicians from across the country. Matt's composition, Wheels in Motion, became an unofficial anthem for the disability rights movement, its melody carrying a message of hope and resilience that transcended physical limitations. All local media, once complicit in Robert and Sarah's deception, now dedicated regular coverage to disability rights issues. They hired disabled journalists and commentators, ensuring authentic voices led the conversation about accessibility and inclusion. The same reporters who had once questioned Nathan's motives now documented the community's journey toward genuine understanding and support. The victory came not just in changed laws but in changed hearts. Children no longer stared at wheelchairs with confusion or fear. Parents didn't hustle their kids away from disabled people in public spaces. The community learned to see ability rather than disability, potential rather than limitation, and strength rather than weakness. Matt watched it all from his position at the piano, his music giving voice to a revolution of understanding. His journey from victim to victor had opened eyes and hearts, transforming a community's shame into purposeful action. The wheels of his chair, once symbols of limitation, had become wheels of change, rolling forward into a future where disability didn't mean invisibility. The Walker Thompson Foundation launched on a bright spring morning, with Matt playing Wheels in Motion on a grand piano in the newly renovated community center. The foundation, built on the ashes of Robert's fraudulent charity, represented everything its predecessor had falsely claimed to be a genuine force for change in the lives of disabled children and their families. Nathan served as the foundation's legal advisor, ensuring transparent operations and ethical fund management. James headed the sports program, developing adaptive athletics that allowed disabled children to experience the joy of competition. But Emily brought her years of experience as Michael's mother to the parent support division, while Matt's music program became the heart of their creative arts initiative. The Foundation's first major project was the Michael and Matt Adaptive Arts Center, a state-of-the-art facility designed with input from disabled artists and performers. The building featured wheelchair-accessible stages, adaptive musical instruments, and studios equipped with specialized technology. Most importantly, it offered scholarships ensuring that no child would be denied access due to financial constraints. Their family dinners expanded to include Foundation staff and program participants, turning Nathan's Garden into a gathering place for a growing community. The piano music that once echoed through an empty house now provided the soundtrack for celebrations of milestone achievements, first performances, sports victories, and personal breakthroughs. Matt's role evolved from survivor to mentor, working with young musicians facing similar challenges. His compositions became teaching tools, helping others find their voices through music. The boy who had once been silenced by abuse now conducted orchestras of empowered young artists, each performance a testament to resilience and possibility. The Foundation's annual gala bore no resemblance to Robert's manipulative charity events. Instead of hollow speeches and false promises, it showcased the genuine achievements of program participants. Disabled artists, athletes, and performers demonstrated their talents not as objects of pity but as accomplished individuals worthy of respect and admiration. On the Foundation's first anniversary, Nathan stood in the garden watching Matt teach a young girl in a wheelchair to play piano, James coach a group of adaptive athletes, and Emily counsel anxious parents. The scene before him was everything he had hoped to create in Michael's memory and everything Matt had deserved from the beginning, a place of unconditional acceptance, support, and love. You know, Matt said that evening, as they sat together after the celebrations, Michael would have loved this. Nathan smiled, wrapping an arm around his son's shoulders. The Foundation had become their way of honoring both boys, Michael's memory and Matt's triumph, while building a future where no disabled child would face abuse or abandonment alone. The garden bloomed around them, filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and hope. They had transformed tragedy into purpose, pain into progress, and loss into legacy. The Wheeler-Thompson Foundation stood as living proof that family isn't defined by blood but by love, and that every broken beginning holds the potential for a beautiful ending. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to be part of our storytelling community. Share your thoughts and emotions in the comments below. How did Matt and Nathan's journey resonate with you? Support our team by subscribing to receive more powerful stories of triumph over adversity. Every like helps us reach more people with messages of hope and resilience. Share this video with friends and family who might need a reminder that love can heal even the deepest wounds. Together, let's spread stories that matter and make a difference in people's lives.